How can you write a good research question? This seems like a simple question, but I often find that students who have a hard time with the empirical research assignment start by having a hard time writing a good question. In this video, I review a few points to keep in mind as you decide on a research question. To put the bottom line up front, it's often easiest to start by thinking about the outcome or effect that you're interested in first. Then think about what might cause that effect. Also, you want to ask a how or a why question. For example, why do some protests lead to a democratic transition, but not others? So how do you start thinking of a good research question? I usually recommend starting with the outcome, the effect, or the dependent variable. Are you interested in the level of freedom in a country, in COVID response, in economic policy, internet regulation? Think through what topic you'd like to learn more about. Then you can start thinking about what might cause a change in that outcome. Does the level of state capacity impact the level of freedom? Does regime type influence COVID policy? What's important here is that it's possible for there to be more than one answer to the question. You need variation on both cause and effect. For example, regimes could be democracies, dictatorships, or something in between. COVID policies could involve lots of surveillance or little. You're going to work on defining your terms more carefully later. For now, just make sure there isn't an obvious answer to your question. Another way to think about this is asking a why or a how question. There are generally three types of questions we ask in empirical research. What questions establish the facts about a new issue? For example, what do American citizens think about the state of democracy in the US? This is actually my favorite kind of research, but I do want to steer you away from this type of project. Doing original research on factual questions takes more time and resources than you have in this class. Most of you will not be able to get past learning what other scholars have found out about an issue. This is an essential first step in a research project, not the last one. So if you have an amazing original question that no one has studied before, try to think of something related to that for this paper. Then ask your original question in a senior thesis. How questions focus on causal mechanisms. They focus on the way a cause leads to an effect. For example, how does economic development lead to democratization? A question like that would have you look at a country's class structure, or level of education, or number of protests, things like that. If you are interested in studying a well-established relationship, like the correlation between development and democracy, looking at these mechanisms or pathways might be a good option for you. Finally, why questions are the most straightforward questions to ask for this type of research. Why are some countries more democratic than others? Why do some countries have bigger social safety nets than others? This allows you to propose an answer while still considering other possibilities. For example, you could set up a research design to test the relationship between economic growth and democratization that would rule out potential cultural and institutional variables. I'd like to offer two cautions to conclude this video. First, don't get too caught up on what versus why as your guiding principle here. For example, it's best not to start with a question about why one thing causes another. For example, asking why Muslim-majority countries are less democratic than other countries. There are two problems here. First, you're putting your proposed answer in the question. You're assuming a causal relationship, and probably some other things, and seeking to prove that causal relationship. You're not testing whether you're right or not. So try to shift your question to more general variables. For example, it's completely valid to ask, what is the relationship between a country's religious tradition and democracy? Yes, technically this question starts with what, but it is about a relationship between variables. This type of question will remove the bias in the first question and set you up to compare potential causes of an effect. My second caution is, unfortunately, don't be too original. In general, I prize originality, but for this particular paper, for a student trying out empirical research for the first time, I honestly recommend you study something that has been studied before. In the past, students who have had amazing original research questions often have had a hard time conducting literature reviews on this topic. I will explain what that means in more detail later, but for now I do recommend you do a quick library or Google Scholar search to see if there's other research on your topic. Ideally, you'll find a few relevant articles that will help you complete future assignments. If you can't find anything at all, you might want to consider modifying your question. To conclude, I just want to emphasize that coming up with a good question is really the foundation of a strong paper. If you're having a hard time or are interested in doing something more original, please come see me during office hours. I would love to discuss.